Welcome to the Corporate Digital Marketing Podcast, where we examine the latest digital strategies, tactics, case studies, and technologies to help you drive your brand and your career to new heights. You'll hear from a range of marketers and industry experts to help you, the corporate marketer, to take advantage of your many digital opportunities. Here's your host, digital marketing expert, published author, and regular media presenter, Peter Applebaum.
Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Corporate Digital Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Applebaum. Today we're going to be speaking to Kristin from eBay. Kristin is the Senior Product Manager from eBay, and we'll hear later in the episode exactly what that means and what she does. She has a fantastic background in the Australian digital industry, having worked at LinkedIn for some years and also Zenith Optimedia, media agency. She has some really interesting insights and probably different types of opinions to the ones we've had from other guests we've had previously. And I think that's good. Actually, one of the things we spoke about when I first suggested that Kristin come on the show is she said, well, I'm not in marketing anymore, Peter. I'm in product development, product management. And I said, well, Kristin, given the background that you have, that's exactly the sort of role that I think listeners will be interested in finding out more about, particularly with an organization like eBay. So here it is, Kristin from eBay. So I'm very happy and lucky to be speaking to Kristin Kunasingam from eBay.
Hi.
Welcome, Kristin. So I've known Kristin for some time. I've been following her career with great interest because, amazingly, I spoke to her about joining Tick Yes to work with us, but she chose to work for this other small organization called LinkedIn. And she has gone from strength to strength ever since. So I was very excited to speak to Kristin about her experiences at LinkedIn and also now at eBay. She also informed me that she's not in digital marketing, which is going to make it an interesting conversation. Could you tell us a little bit more about your role now, Kristin?
Yeah, so I'm in product management at the moment, and it's something that I've always been interested in, and it's not something I knew what I was actually looking at or looking for when I started down this journey. Much of it was actually while I was in Zenith, my days at Zenith, and quite often the questions I was asking our publishers at that time was like, why couldn't the product just do this? And sometimes the questions I got back, or the feedback I got from some of the international publishers were, the people you want to speak to is not us. They're actually people that sit in our head office who actually build the products. And I was like, and that piqued my interest as to what is this role and what do these people do? And actually during my time at LinkedIn, I got the opportunity to work with our product team. And that's when I discovered and learned about this concept of product management, and that's really why I'm here at eBay doing product management.
I actually think a lot of people would think when you say product, they think physical products.
True, that is also part of it. That's a fairly safe assumption. And in the digital space, it's everything that a website you would look at. So going on to a Facebook, for example, the newsfeed, there will be a product manager that will be looking at the newsfeed alone. That is just one of the concepts of a product manager. And if you look at the newsfeed, there's all these different buttons and different things that you can click on. And there are different product managers that will look after each of those sections. So that is really the concept of product management. It's thinking of it as the owner of a particular section or owner of the site, and what they can do to ensure that the users make the most out of it.
So what does that mean from an eBay point of view for you? What is your product?
So my product's actually the selling site. So I ensure that when sellers come onto our site, whether they're a consumer to consumer or a business type seller, that they make the most out of it or get the most out of our platform.
You have, as I mentioned in the intro, you have quite an extensive digital marketing background, and also, I guess, an account management, business development background as well at LinkedIn in particular. How has that helped you being in your current role?
So much of it is really skills development, and I think that's something we sometimes forget, and we're so focused on the role or the title. And I think the skills development part is where, my previous experiences has really led me to here today. So if you look at when I was at the agency side, a lot of what we had to do in digital advertising at that time is really having to pitch digital. So you really learn like the sales skill set, but you also learn how to, weave in a conversation about what the marketer that you were speaking to understood, and try to bridge that gap with the digital concept as well. Because quite often you were speaking to marketers who didn't really understand the concept of digital, and you had to speak to their language. So you translate those kind of skills that you try and make it a little bit more approachable for them, about how they can digest what the concept of digital is from, someone who really is so familiar with TV advertising or print advertising. So, you bridge that gap. And so focusing on that skills and that kind of development really helped me to where I am here today. And even while I was at LinkedIn, it was something that someone I worked with actually really helped me understand. You have your role, and that's your, the core of what you're doing. But quite often there's all these gray areas around it that could make it part of your role. And that was actually how I started working with our product team in different capacity. It's not necessarily something that was, hard coded into my role, but it was something that I was quite passionate about. And I was like, if only they could hear a little bit more from Australia about how our Australian, customers were doing and what they wanted to hear from our product, and feed that into the team, and how that can actually, help other people. And that's really how it started working as well. So whenever I had the opportunity to work with our product team in any capacity, I would take it up, because it meant a voice at the table, but also being able to be part of that process of what was going on. So I know I didn't quite answer your question. I'm just going quite broad, but really take the core.
You're the perfect guest, Kristin.
It's like, don't focus only on the core of what you're doing. Try and see what is in that gray area that you can really kind of, make it as part of your core. And that's how, when I was at LinkedIn, my role evolved a lot, and it enabled hey, this kind of looks interesting, and I expanded my role and made sure that I brought that into it as well. So, that's how you can also start to think about how your skills develop, and think about not just limiting it to what you're doing at the moment, but how you can translate what you're doing into other areas and other industries. And for example, a sales skill set, which is what I really got to finesse when I was at LinkedIn. It wasn't something necessarily I thought, I really wanted to have, but it's a great skill set whether you're going to be in any industry, because regardless of what you're doing, you always have to sell yourself. And so learning the sales acumen is also something that I would encourage people to have, whether it's going to be a short-term thing or a long-term thing. It's not a bad skill to have. So
obviously marketing has evolved quite a deal since this digital thing came along some time ago. And I think what you've just described is perfect background for a lot of marketers, particularly young marketers who are starting out and who are interested in where is the growth trajectory for my career. Mm-hmm. You mentioned sales, and I'm a big fan of sales. I mean, my background also was pure marketing on the client side. Mm-hmm. But I think if you know sales, you are bulletproof. Yeah. So how do you think that translates for a young assistant brand manager or even a product manager who's listening to this and saying, yeah, but I've never really done any selling, Kristin. How does that work for me?
Yeah, I know. And that's actually a very good book I would recommend for people to read if they can. And it's they talk about the different salespeople, and I'll need to get you the name.
Yes, please do. And we can include a link to the Amazon.
Yeah. But it talks about the different types of sales. Actually, it's called the Challenger Sale. That's it. That's what the book is called.
The Challenger Sale. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it talks about what they've done is they analyze salespeople throughout the years, right? And what they found was there were different types of salespeople. And I say this, and the reason I say is whether you consciously know it or unconsciously know it, you actually have to sell in every role that you do. Even as a marketer, as a brand marketer, you're starting out, you have to pitch your idea to your manager, and that is some form of selling. So being able to understand that selling actually is in every part of our day to day, and I don't want it to be a taboo word. And I think quite often you think of sales, you always think of maybe like, a typical salesperson, or you have stereotypes that you bring to that role, but there is such a variety of salespeople. And reading that book, the Challenger Sale, interesting enough, the concept of the Challenger Sale was a type of salesperson that could last whether the economy was great or not so great, because they were able to actually help educate their customer about what it was that they were trying to sell. So they were not blatantly selling; they were more help selling kind of thing. So
solution selling.
Solution selling. Yeah, that's probably a better.
For many years, I've been a big believer that the best person or the best professional to be in life is a marketing-oriented salesperson. Yeah. Being just a sales-oriented salesperson means that you're missing out on understanding what your customers really want, what their fears, needs, and wants and desires are. Being being a marketer is wonderful. As I say, my love and passion has always been marketing. But the more I get to know about marketing is exactly what you're saying, Christine. It's like sales is so fundamental to it.
It is.
And back in the old days, long before you started your career, a lot of people would say, "Oh, those damn salespeople, they've got no idea. They're just
They
out
still
there."
say that today.
They just say, okay, and they're just out there. They're cutting the price. They don't care about the brand. Whereas a smart salesperson, the brand is central to what they're selling. The value that a brand can offer a consumer, whatever the type of customer it is critical to being able to satisfactorily meet needs.
Exactly. And, I've been lucky during my time at LinkedIn that I got to work with so many different salespeople, but also being exposed to some of like the great salespeople around the world, and which get celebrated. And you want to learn from these people. And interesting enough, people always say that sales is limited to like you have to be an extrovert. And I was like, actually, some of the most successful people I know are introverts. And they're not necessarily the loudest people in the room, but they are also they're also very deliberate with what they say, and they're also very conscientious about what they say to their customers or even their colleagues. And that, I think that demystified a lot of things when I discovered this many years ago. And
debunking the myths.
Yeah, and it opened up my eyes about what the concept of sales is. And to be honest, I'm grateful for having had to be exposed to the sales environment, because it definitely taught me things that it would be a lifelong skill set.
The old days where someone was like a new marketing graduate would join a marketing department, many organizations would put them in the sales team for 6 months, 12 months, what a purgatory to some. I actually think that it's a wonderful way to go. And in traditional companies, like the trade marketing manager or the trade marketing department, I think is a wonderful place because it straddles sales and marketing. Mm-hmm. Do you have a modern day equivalent, a current equivalent at eBay or at LinkedIn?
Well, even my time at here, we've got a huge marketing team. By time at LinkedIn, like we still had concepts of trade marketing, and that's what they would define themselves as, trade marketing. But they will be doing marketing for the different departments as well. So I don't think the concept has really changed too much. And obviously, there's more that is built into that role nowadays, or expected of the role nowadays. But there are still fundamentals that are still the same. So
let's drill down into, we talked a lot about selling and marketing and what the differences and how they should be merged, if you will, or they always were. How does that translate into a digital context?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, and it's something that I think a lot of departments are still trying to figure out. I think what has happened is sales and marketing used to be one department many years ago, and then they split up into two different departments run by two different heads of. And I think nowadays what you're starting to see is that convergence coming back together again, and sales and marketing there's a lot more alignment in it with those two departments. And during my time at LinkedIn, I remember seeing a lot of big organizations that are going through that trend. And I think the good thing about smaller organizations, they're a little bit more nimble. They can actually make that happen a lot quicker. But you do see that, what the salesperson a sales team are always asking is more accountability from the marketing team, and marketing team also asking the salespeople for more accountability of what's actually being put out there. So increasingly, I think in the concept of the digital world, you are going to see a lot more accountability coming from both departments, and the need for the two departments to actually really work together a lot closer, because really at the end of the day, a marketer's job is only going to be as efficient as what the salesperson also brings in. So there definitely needs to be the two working together a lot closer. And as measurement gets better, as you have new technologies that are brought out there, you want the two to be able to be united and bring together a more cohesive measurement method for them.
Right. We've spoken a lot about the corporate side of things, which I guess is appropriate given the name of this podcast. But let's talk about the customers, the people at the other end of the screen or the other end of the smartphone, as to what are the benefits, what is the added value for them as a result of this convergence that you've been talking about?
Oh, that's a good one. I think what it also then brings down to, if I had to look at it, like at the end of the day, a marketer who is going to be putting a message out there for the salesperson to also then speak to that same customer. if that increases personalization a lot more and more effective, so you're having a conversation with the customer, and they've been exposed to what the brand messaging is, and then when the salesperson speaks to them, it's just closing the loop and tying it loop and just finalizing it. I think you get that increased personalization as to what it is, but you also have the effectiveness that there's consistency with what the message is going to be put out there, but also that the salesperson is also having that thorough conversation and really being able to bridge that gap and understanding the organizational needs of how their solution is actually going to be beneficial to the organization that they're speaking to. So I think that personalization piece is also quite key. And more, I mean, as a end consumer or end seller, the customer that you're talking to, everyone's so pressed for time. And if there's efficiencies that can be made prior to someone having the initial conversations, then I think that's also going to be beneficial of time saving, because there's just so much out there that you just sometimes it's hard to weave what is and what isn't right. And everyone says that their products are always going to be better than the next competitor, but we never really know because everyone's just selling you what is the best. So,
of course. And look, I guess what you're talking about is really CX. That's the latest trend, customer experience. Everyone's talking about it. It's just
everyone's trying to map it out.
That's right, and puts a whole lot of variables around it, and it really comes back to understanding what your customers need and giving it to them.
Yeah, and then I think that's also goes into a trend which I think will be coming up a lot more, and you hear it a lot, is automation, right?
Of course.
And anything that can help simplify it, because it can be a very manual process. And I have gone through the concept, have gone through mapping it out with customers before of like, when they're exposed to this message, this is what you want, and this is therefore what the salesperson should be having the conversation. But you can never really control all of that, because you could say the salesperson may speak to them first, but then they get exposed to your marketing message, and then it messes up the whole stream of how you
particularly if they're not aligned.
Exactly.
Right.
So you want to have some sort of automation available in order to kind of to help that process and help streamline some of the processes where it makes sense.
Automation is a very common theme that's spoken about by a lot of the guests who've been on the podcast so far. I would put a big but in that conversation and suggest to you, automation is wonderful, but it can't and won't be able to interpret successfully 100% the human factor.
Of course. And that's the big part about what artificial intelligence is also they're trying to do. And but at the same time, I think that also then goes back to what marketers will be required to do in the future, where the skill set changes a little bit more from what you would have you'd be trained from in school, right? So in school you'll be like, the what here are the marketing fundamentals and things like that, and that probably will not go away. But in the automation world, what you're probably going to have to do a little bit more of is analyzing and being able to understand the skill sets around data analysis. And it's something that we've seen the trend where they're trying to hire a lot more data scientist type roles into marketing organizations. But that is not a bad skill set for a marketer to complement themselves with. And I think that will also be a trend that you will start to see a lot more in as well.
So you're saying as a marketer, we need to be data scientists?
To some extent, I think in order to have an effective conversation with a data scientist in the future, you need to understand the fundamentals of it. So being able to say, hey, I'm starting to see this trend in the data point. What can we get into? And for the data scientist to then translate that into something more meaningful, I think we do need some fundamentals to change. Okay,
Kristin, you've messed with my mind enough. Here I am starting out in my marketing career, and you want me to be a data scientist, a salesperson, a marketer. My goodness, where does it end? So practically speaking, because obviously you've traversed quite a few areas in your career, what course would you suggest a marketer does? Is it like, so I've just got my BCom in marketing, and I've thinking I'm pretty special and I know all about this, and I'm on Instagram and Snapchat and LinkedIn and Facebook all the time. So I've got this digital thing. I got it covered. What do you, as an experienced digital professional and marketing and sales professional, what would you recommend? We're kind of jumping around all over the place, as I said we would, which is good. I like this.
I don't know where you would start, because frankly, I think if I look back, there is no straight line into success or to get you to where you want to be. I think what you need to identify very early on is what you're interested in. So if you say, yes, you want to focus on digital marketing, that's fine. But be quick to understand as well what other skill sets complement that quickly. So if it's sales, fine. spend a couple of years developing that skill set. And once you think that, yes, I've understood the fundamentals, focus on another skill set. And I think that's something, if I look back, that's how, as I've transitioned from one company to another company, but also roles to roles, that's really what has actually helped me transform into the next position.
Right.
So it's not necessarily about trying to master everything at one go, because let's face it, we've got about 30 years under our belt to work. And
some of us, Kristin.
Some of us, yes. We work for a very long time, and you don't want to say that, the thing that you learn in day one is the same thing you're learning, 20, 30 years down the track. You want to evolve that conversation a lot more, and, focus on one thing first and try not to master. You don't have to master everything, but be open to what else it can be out there. And I look at that, and you look at things like, digital trends happen. And I can't say in 5 years, this is what it's going to be, because, the next Snapchat might come and go, but, the next Twitter might come and go. But you may have something that I can't even tell you the name of will come. And be open to what will come, and try not to resist it. Be open to what you can learn from it. Try to test it if you possible. And you've had Christoph on your show, and
from L'Oreal.
Yeah, from L'Oreal, and
he was wonderful. He was
yes.
So much information.
But he was also someone who was my manager, actually.
Oh, there you go.
One thing I learned from him was the fact that you can't just say, make an assumption on something without actually testing it. And he was always a big advocate for testing and learning. And the only way to really test it is, to have a meaningful insight is to test it. And we did that. And that's something I've always taken with me, is to always try something new. So, and the same thing I would say with your career is try something before you actually make a call about whether you like it or not.
Test and measure.
Mm-hmm.
I think and this is again is a recurring theme for this podcast, and one of my bugbears is that I think a lot of organizations, and in turn people within those organizations, do digital. They do digital because they have to do it. They've gone to the conferences, they've read the trade magazines, consumers and customers are all online. We've got to do digital. But there's not really a great foundational knowledge or understanding as to why they're doing it and what's easy. Because there's any number of organizations that will provide services to do Facebook or email marketing or build websites or apps or those types of things. But it's the why, I think, and really goes back to the understanding of why consumers and customers are doing things and what decisions they make and why. And that's where that data scientist comes into it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, that wasn't a good question because you just said I agree.
No, it's true. I agree. And I look at what brand that I really admire is the tourism board, right? And
Tourism Australia,
yeah. And they have all the different cities set up, and it's just someone as a consumer. When I look at that, it really inspires me to travel to go visit the rest of the country. And frankly, I follow them on Instagram, but it's not necessarily about them trying to make the platforms to adapt to them. They've adapted themselves to the platform. And I think that's a really good example of how a brand, they get it. Instagram is all about images. It's all about the pictures. And, that's what is fundamental to how the platform was built. And they've adopted to it. And I think that's crucial as well as brands, try different platforms, is not to try to adapt, to get the platform to adapt to them, but to adapt to the platform, because effectively that's why the platform exists.
Right.
That's what has made them successful. But try not to, and it allows the brand to also express themselves in a different way. And I think that's something that sometimes I notice brands don't often, or they struggle to, comprehend with that. Because
most brands, the vast majority of brands, are established pre-internet, pre-interactivity and pre-personalization. And they struggle to go beyond the confines of what have been very successfully put in place over a long, long period of time with some brands billions of dollars worth of marketing funds put behind them. But even today, I was catching a train to come and have a chat with you, and there was an outdoor poster and said something about eBay. I thought, hang on, are they reading my phone? Are they reading my mind? Did they know I was coming to see you? Of course they weren't, but that's really the ultimate goal, isn't it? To really, and there are the beacons which can send messages to you in shopping centres and places, but that's really the ultimate. Do you think we'll ever get there?
I hope so.
Right.
I really hope so.
Don't you think that's a bit intrusive?
Yes, it is, and it's funny because the whole concept about privacy comes up, over and over again, and where do you draw the line of privacy? But at the same time, I think that needs to be the education as to what you're giving back to marketers, and I think that transparency about
Given back to marketers or to customers?
Well, both ways, right? For the
Right.
beacon to actually work,
Right.
the customer has to actually give their data to someone.
But why would I?
That's a fair point, and I think that needs to be clear.
Right.
What are you
What's the
subscribing
benefit?
to if by giving my data? And I maybe because I'm a little bit more aware now, than I was many years ago, I'm very cautious of what kind of emails I sign up to, because it's so easy to just give your email address, but at the end of the day, you sometimes don't really know what you're signing up for. So as the whole concept about privacy and beacons and things like that, there needs to be a lot more transparency about what you're actually signing up for.
I'm a big believer that if you actually step out the benefits to customers, consumers, customers of giving their information or allowing their information to be crafted to give to organizations, to give back a more personalized and customized experience for them, they'll say yes.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's that fundamental step that is so often missing. It's like, we're going to take your information and we're going to give you this experience. And it's like, well, hang on, that's not really. It's like the retargeting, like the Google retargeting. It's like I looked at a website 3 weeks ago about,
You're still getting the
and I'm still getting the message. How do I turn it off? How do I stop the noise, Christine? What's the solution?
data.
Google, are you listening?
Oh, it's true though. Like the retargeting one, I mean, all of us have been victims of of a bad retargeting ad, and I think there's still a lot that can be done. I mean, a lot has been done, but a lot more can be done in order to be a bit more effective. But I think quite often as well with organizations, everyone's still trying to like figure out how to use the data. I think, big data was a topic a couple of years ago. I'm sure it still is today, but I think as nowadays it's probably, they've got people translating data, but now it's actually making it more meaningful about how to use it a bit more effectively. And I think that's the biggest part that we're yet to see it happen.
You have experience with overseas markets as well. You obviously keep a keen eye on what's happening in Europe and the US, of course, and in Asia. Yeah. Do you feel that Australia is behind the eight ball when it comes to the foundational understanding of the benefits of digital and what it can offer organizations?
To some extent, I think we do a really good job in actually adopting them.
Right.
As people I've worked with as well, like everyone's very keen on trying something new or trying in like a latest trend or be the market with the trend.
Right.
But also I think the other piece is the adoption by the everyday consumers. It's very different. So I think, and we're a small market, so, quite often budgets are also restricted and, you see things happen, but we have adopted the mobile phone very quickly and it was a need. And I think that's the difference when things are adopted because there is simple why as to why someone needed to use it. It will be very quick. But when you're trying really hard to just sell them on something that it's not very familiar to them, I think that's going to be the hardest part to the adoption. So I think to answer your question, in some instances, yes, and in some instances, no. Okay.
Well, I think that I guess that's a kind of a self-serving question because it's yet another one of my bugbears, and that is, I think there's, unlike in the US and the UK, whereas there is a direct mail heritage, we don't have that here. So that's why I think that professionals are struggling here in Australia, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, to really to speak to thought and opinion leaders and successful professionals like yourself to really spread the word as to what you can do with this. It is going back to our initial discussion. It is sales and marketing. It really is matching needs and doing it more effectively, whether it's using data or beacons or mobile technology or mobile marketing. There's a range of different ways you can do it. So you mentioned that Tourism Australia, you think is an organisation that does digital marketing well. What are some other ones that you could think of?
Actually, one I've recently looked at as well is Lenovo, and I know it's they're
everywhere.
They're everywhere. Well, there's that thing, so they're doing it well because I'm obviously front of mind when I think about it. But I think what I've also been keeping track is like they've done the whole sales and marketing thing a little bit. They've started to do that a lot more, and I've having worked with them during my time at LinkedIn, and having read like content after that, they've been doing that well. Trying to like do the conversions between sales and marketing a lot more, and obviously it's driving them the results. And
can you take us through, obviously you don't work for Lenovo but you worked with Lenovo, take us through why you think they're doing it well and why you think it is successful for them.
So I think with them having spoken to them like years ago and where they are now, many years ago you would see Lenovo is probably not a consideration if you had to think of a laptop. But now when you start to see the numbers, they're obviously a lot more of a consideration factor in terms of people choosing the brand. But I think what was interesting was the fact that they realized that they had a sales force, and the marketing team also was another opportunity there. And the marketing team realized that by using or working with the sales team, they were able to actually see better results. And so there was a lot more training with the sales team directly about using LinkedIn, for example, more effectively to be able to work with end customers. So, and I've seen that loop happen a lot, and that actually was part of the reason why I think maybe part of what was driving their success. But also they were willing to try different things. So I've seen them you see the YouTube advertising, and you see they do big brand campaigns, and they're a bit more bold with all the things, and it's quite nice to see that.
So it's not just doing one thing, it's doing many different things, which is marketing.
Yeah.
But I think, again, we keep going back to this recurring theme. It's not us and them, marketing and sales, it's us.
Yep.
Okay, so Lenovo, any other organisations you think do it well? You've given us Tourism Australia, Lenovo,
who else is it?
eBay obviously is doing a fabulous job.
Yep, it's our big brand campaign. Nice to see that everywhere.
Good.
I think LinkedIn does it well too, and they do it well from a content marketing perspective, and that's another. I know it's another buzzword, but it was something that LinkedIn identified that it was a key from our customers at that time, that people didn't really understand how to market on LinkedIn effectively, and that's what they focused on. How can they educate marketers or agency folks to actually use the platform? And they understood that content marketing was the best way to go, because people were learning more about it, and it was a way to effectively measure it, and that's how they went about it.
I think when we talk about customization and understanding customers really, really well, you've got the big gorilla that's about to come into Australia is Amazon. They do it so well, and I think our previous podcast we spoke to Jim from Allen and Unwin, and obviously in the book industry that's had a huge impact, and who knows what impact it's going to have in the rest of Australia. Do you have any thoughts about that, particularly from an eBay point of view?
It's going to be exciting times, so I look forward to seeing that.
Stay tuned, says Christine. Okay, so final few questions. Where do you think digital marketing will be in the next 5 years?
I hope a lot more integrated. I hope it's not going to be... I hope to say that in the next 5 years, that as you have a lot more of the digital natives entering the workforce, that it's not going to be a us versus them conversation.
Right.
I'd hope that it would be a lot more integrated. We would get better at measurement, where you see TV advertising combined with search a lot better. I know we do it, and it's doing many brands are doing it well now, but I just hope that it's a no-brainer kind of conversation.
Right, okay. It's a bit like it's a no-brainer to do digital now, as opposed to 5 years ago where it was almost a discretionary thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question, the top 3 tips. What are the top 3 tips, Christine, you would have for other marketers who are interested in succeeding in digital?
Oh, okay. I actually wrote this one down because I couldn't I was thinking about this well, and I want to make sure it's a meaningful answer for the guys listening in. Don't focus only on the skill set that you have today. Think about skill sets that you want to continuously develop, because that's going to be able to see you through in your career. I think that's one thing I would definitely say. Think about skill sets versus job titles, because I think it's very easy to get hung up on head of, senior manager of, director of, but really the value you're going to bring is the skill set.
So it's like you're talking about title inflation, where people get titles beyond.
Caught up with that.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's like saying when why people go traveling for a year or a couple of years before they start working or take a break to go traveling. And you see people who travel have a lot more perspective about life and different things, and they offer that to their role. And I think it's the same thing with skill set, is you learning a different skill set can actually offer a lot of perspective into your day-to-day, even if it's not directly, but it will definitely offer some view. So I would say don't focus on skill set.
Don't focus on title, focus on skill set.
That's it. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying.
I do.
And also be open to what else is out there. I think in terms of, don't just limit yourself to digital media alone. I think, before you look at like any company's offering, like you look at LinkedIn, for example, the offering was only not just limited to marketers. It was also an offering to HR professionals, and you also have an offering for sales professionals. And, if you only focus on the advertising side, you're quite limited. But if you could look at it from a holistic, how can my organization benefit from the services that these companies are offering? You can actually look at and be able to branch out a lot more. So, and it offers more potential about what else you can do as a brand. So I would say, try to look at the full suite of what's being offered in front of you.
So in essence, you're saying be curious.
Be curious.
Right.
Yeah. And the last one is probably a little bit more down my alley, but it may not be for everybody. But read extensively and don't just read, digital. Like try read different things to hear different perspective. I just finished Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella, and I would say it was a very interesting read, and I really enjoyed just hearing from someone at that level and reading his perspective and his thoughts about what it meant taking over Microsoft at the time, and how he's definitely transformed the brand a lot. So read if you can, even if it is just blogs, and listening to podcasts. Try to to immerse yourself in something else as well.
We're going to ask you to send through a list of suggested blogs and books you have for listeners.
I can send you some.
Please do, because we'll put it up on the show notes for this
Sure,
particular
I
episode. Kristin, fantastic, really impressive and interesting. We could speak for another 2 hours, but I don't think we'd have anyone listening other than ourselves. But look, that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast, is that I get to speak to people like you on a regular basis and learn new things as well, which I think everyone will be when they listen to this. So Kristin, thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion as much as I did. I think it was really, really interesting to talk about differences between sales and marketing, where it's going, where Kristin thinks it's going to go. And obviously she's going to be at the vanguard of that, given the objective and the ambition that she has, which I think is wonderful. And any digital marketer, any corporate marketer, no matter what the age or stage, is can and should be inspired by what Kristin has had to say and where she thinks the industry is going. So thank you again for listening to this episode of the Corporate Digital Marketing Podcast, and we look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
You just listened to the Corporate Digital Marketing Podcast. If you have any suggestions about what you'd like us to talk about in future podcasts, email us at info@tickyes.com. For the transcript, links from this episode and other information, go to www.tickyes.com and click on the podcast link. Have a great digital day.